rules of order. I think we start with taking roll, if I'm not mistaken, making sure we have a quorum.
Mr.
And
Newberry will do that for us.
All right. Thank you, Travis.
Yes, ma'am. You'll just be patient with me for a few seconds while I get the YouTube confirmed. All right. Member Bartlesmeyer.
Here.
Councilmember Brost.
Here.
Member Delonte. Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Member Sturman.
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg. Member Berger.
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino. Member Patton. Councilmember Rambo. Member Braman.
Here.
Councilmember Hopper.
Here.
Member Donaldson.
Here.
Councilmember Galani.
Here.
Co-chair Holthouse.
Here.
And co-chair Farmer will be arriving late. Thank you.
All righty. Well, I think we have made good progress in the last month with the things we can control. Our plan that Washington, D.C. was going to get its act together and figure out how to fund an infrastructure bill is kind of on hold. But I guess, again, we can only control what we can control. I don't really have a lot to report and add beyond that. When Councilmember Farmer logs on, he's got a couple more things to add. I hope that the group will let us deviate from the agenda enough to let him jump in with his opening remarks. So I guess the next order of business would be approval of our minutes. Is there anybody who has any questions or comments? All right, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Second. Looks like Mr. Brost. All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Abstain.
So the meeting minutes are approved. Are there any public comments? Mr. Newberry, are you the one that manages that and keeps track of it for us?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We do not have any attendance via Zoom. So I don't believe there will be any public comments for tonight's meeting.
All righty. Which I guess brings us pretty quickly to our presentation from Wilson Hydro. I don't know if they're present to walk through that or whether somebody from city staff is going to be the spokesperson for that report.
Well, Madam Chair, I'd like to do just a quick introduction and then a shout out to Joe Wilson, who obviously is a Cardinals fan. So we appreciate that. As you know, over the last couple of months, which is actually the last couple of meetings, Todd Wagner and Joe Wilson have been presenting their findings relative to the detention retention basin status in the Cox Creek watershed. The first discussion, which was in August, Mr. Wagner did a very good job of providing detention basin 101 kind of facts and figures. And then at our meeting in August, so it's July and August, I apologize. In the meeting in August, they actually gave us some hard facts on the detention and retention basin and the capabilities of what we have out there. Along with that information, they provided some tips on maintenance of bridges and other structures in the watersheds, as well as a maintenance program, and then also finalize some of the other information they have been working on. Tonight, they are presenting that report in its final form. Along with that, there were a couple of questions that were raised by the task force members that they did write down and are ready to respond to tonight. So tonight you have the final draft of that second report from Wilson Hydro. along with an explanation of what they did in terms of responding to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Really don't have a formal presentation this evening. The information we presented last time pretty well summed up the second part of our report. We did address Co-Chair Holthouse's question on the locations of the detention basins, added the latitude and longitude to the table identifying the basins. And we put some additional information regarding rock checks and check dams that I believe Mr. Sturman had asked about. And really, we're here to address any questions that you might have as a result of looking over the report, having had that in your hands more than just a couple days, as we were last meeting.
And I guess one of the questions I have is maybe not one for you, Mr. Wilson, but maybe for those on the city council or city staff that have more experience with these things than I do. It seems like there were some pretty specific actionable recommendations in terms of sites that ought to be inspected at least annually and after major storm events. And I guess I'm wondering whether there's, I know we've got a stormwater master plan on our to-do list, but my question is there any possibility to sort of implement sections of that or put some of these actionable items in place before we wait for the final product and for everything to be done?
Well, certainly Mr. Brown, our Director of Public Works, can answer the question as well, but I would simply say yes. I think if we put all of our eggs in the big basket, which is the 3 major repair restorations, we'll basically let a lot of time pass without really achieving much in terms of addressing some of the causes.
So specifically, there were some recommendations for inspections. There were some best practices or recommendations for bridge design. And I think there was also an estimate, at least, of what it would take to, have the resources required to make sure that the trees that fell into the creek were cleared out and we didn't, exacerbate the problems by creating turbulence at, spots where the bank was already fragile enough that trees were falling into it. And then we kind of, create a spin cycle at that location to make sure that we really, make the problems worse. So, I don't know how we proceed with identifying whether there are city resources to do things like the inspections already, or whether we need a budget for additional consulting fees, or, whether it's more cost effective to hire some city staff to do some of these things. I think there's some things we could, that aren't the, the $5 and $10 million items that Mr. Vunich should point out we are going to, twiddle our thumbs for a long time if we wait for those problems to be solved. So how do we go about figuring out what it takes to evaluate and implement the ones that we can do in the meantime?
Oh, and again, Ms. Holthouse, Mr. Brown is unmuted, so I'm going to let him go first, and then
Okay.
he may have the same answer I do. So thank you.
Well, I think, and thank you, I think it might be appropriate for Joe, Steve Cross, and myself to talk further maybe about this. I wasn't prepared to really get into details at this point just yet. I'm certain there are some items that we can do. I think some of these things we already do. And I think some of them are things that we don't do and would require a change of course. So it might be better if the 3 of us get together and kind of go through it in more detail. And I think we'd be certainly happy to report back at a subsequent meeting. But if there's anything in particular that you want to call out, maybe in the meantime, bring it to our attention. But I think that would be my suggestion.
Okay, and all I was asking for is the process. I didn't necessarily expect an answer, just trying to figure out once we've identified, and as I say, that off the top of, my notes, it was inspections, and I think a lot of that is probably already happening. So maybe that's really just putting down in writing something that's already, being done completely, or at least a portion of it's being done. There was also the sort of some suggestions on bridge design, and how we might want to incorporate that into whatever we can do to control those things. It sounds like there are a lot of players when it comes to bridge design, and we're kind of down on the list with a bunch of other people. The other one was cleanup of trees that fall into the creek. And then I guess the other item that has a lower cost, and therefore maybe would be something we could consider in the meantime, would be the idea of moving some bed load around. Although it sounded like that required permitting, so it's not going to be something that happens quickly, but it's something where maybe the cost isn't prohibitive. Mr. Cross, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brown is correct that that would be a discussion between Mr. Vunich, Mr. Brown, and myself. Now is an opportune time. We are right now in the process of preparing the 2022 budget, which includes the capital budget. I'm actually reviewing sections of that as we speak. So this would be an opportune time sooner rather than later to see if there are some of these smaller projects or something that we could build into the 2022 capital budget that we might be able to pick off and get going on that in the coming year. So this is a good time to do that. Thank you.
And is there anything that you need besides the report you've got in hand from Wilson Hydro? I mean, does it take some action by this committee to recommend those things, or is it just, it's in good hands and it'll work itself out through the normal budgeting process?
I think between Mr. Vunich and Mr. Brown, they know the items that we might be able to pick off. I think this group has agreed or come to an agreement on those. It's just a matter of, unless there's some prioritization that you want to do on those. But we'd want to see if we want to build in one or two of those in the budget if it'll fit. With the funding that we have to fund the 2022 budget at this point, anyway.
And Steve, certainly something like the sediment removal would be more or less a capital project. There would be some expense involved. There would be potential easements to be acquired. There would be permitting and engineering involved. So that would be something that really would need to be programmed as an improvement project in my opinion, under the capital improvement program potentially. It may not be as expensive as some of the other things, obviously, that we talked about, but there would be some expenses involved to get that incorporated or that started.
Well, if there is something relatively small, and I'm going to emphasize that because this is coming out of current funding. This is not from any funds that we have right now. We don't have an infrastructure bill in place. We don't have funding from that source right now. So it would need to be small. But in the effort to try to perhaps show some progress and get the ball rolling, if there is something small that you or Mr. Vunich feel that we can build into the plan, into the budget, let's at least take a look at it.
Joe's got his hand up, I can see.
And Madam Chair, with your permission, both Mr. Cross and Mr. Brown kind of responded in the same way I would have to your question. But I also think that if the task force tonight accepts the report from Wilson Hydro as presented, I think at our next meeting, we need to kind of break down all of those items into things we're doing, things that we should do, and then projects that we think we can accomplish based upon what Mr. Cross has described as a limited budget through funds that we'll receive in our capital improvements program. And that's where I think the next couple of meetings of the task force will focus, is just what can we do based upon the recommendations that's come out of the report. But it's all contingent on you saying tonight the report's acceptable in its current form and that we need to proceed forward with it. Thank you.
And I
Yeah.
guess, based on that comment, Mr. Vunich, is there any discussion from the committee, questions, comments that would keep us from accepting the report and, moving it forward as a, the document this committee has looked at, reviewed, and supports adopting as recommendations? Any questions, any comments?
I was just going to ask, it might be slightly off topic, but this kind of popped in my head the other day as we're talking about the budget and next year and all this kind of stuff. Do we ever, or have we as a city ever created any kind of like a matching program? So like if, not with some of these big projects necessarily, but if we've got something relatively small that sort of should involve the HOA or a homeowner or something along those lines, that we could do maybe even just a limited matching, or like we figure out the, I don't know, the engineering or whatever needs to go on, and then allow those people to either take on the expense of fixing it, or, if it's cleaning out honeysuckle and putting in better plants or whatever it is. Have we ever done anything like that? Obviously not for this, just in general with the city.
I'm not aware of us having done a partnership quite like that and having a financial arrangement, but Mr. Vunich certainly can jump in to see if he remembers us having done something like that. Now, the concept itself, I think could be accomplished, assuming that we could get buy-in through the HOA or something, but we could, draft up an agreement, about what parties are responsible for what. We could do that. I don't know personally, if that's been done in the past. Mr. Vunich, do you recall anything like that?
I don't recall any cost sharing with HOAs. We oftentimes do provide like dumpsters and things like that for cleanups in the creek, or bush honeysuckle hacks, things along those lines. But I don't recall any kind of matching program that involved funding. Thank you.
We could do it though, Mr. Farmer.
Okay. I was just thinking, like, I'm trying to remember. I know I've gotten them from the city before I was on the council. Like, you guys did that tree giveaway thing where you could get like saplings and stuff like that. I'm just wondering if we have whatever plants are recommended, and it's like, hey, we'll put a dumpster out here, you get rid of the honeysuckle, and we've negotiated a bulk price on whatever the thing is that needs to go in there in its place. That might go a long ways with some of these HOAs, because I know a lot of these folks that are on these boards, they don't even have the time to understand what we're talking about, let alone try to figure out how to make it all happen. If it's kind of a easy thing that you're just like, look, here's what it is, we might be able to get some success on that.
Kind of in the brainstorming category as well. I remember the model of, sort of the arch being a, design competition, and, a winner was selected. I'm wondering if we could create a little friendly competition between HOAs by sort of inspiring them to at least do the design work and bring forward proposals with maybe some award that would help offset the implementation cost for, whatever one was deemed to be most, creative, or, best capital maintenance cost, ratio. We could set whatever criteria we wanted for the solution, but whether there would be a way to sort of inspire, some attention, some focus, a little, reason for homeowner associations to engage with some kind of a deadline that was a positive, rather than, a stick that says, you gotta do this, or else it's hard to enforce. So any other ideas on how we can kind of build partnerships or get people engaged? Lauren?
Yes, I just put the link in the chat panel, but I remembered from a lecture with the Missouri State Invasive Species Task Force that they have done buyback programs. They still have one for the Callery pear tree family. I was pretty sure I read something at one time relating to honeysuckle cutback and a partnership with that. So I think we can kind of keep them as a resource and let our homeowners know about that, because that includes whether or not it's on the creek bank or just in their yard or street tree, in terms of calorie repair program. And it looks like they do have a volunteer nonprofit that is dedicated to trees and invasive species removal that I can put in the link as well.
Thank you so much. Mr. Cross, I think your hand's up.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. This is an operational issue, and I wanted to make a comment to Travis, if I may. And the reason I'm bringing this up is we are looking at how to capture comments that are made in the chat box, since this is a public meeting, and we have found that we've had some issues where once the meeting is closed, those go away. So I was going to ask Mr. Newberry if at this point in time, if he's able to maybe make a screenshot or something for these chats that are being posted right now, so that we don't lose visibility and be able to post them. I had not had a chance to read your email from earlier. Sounds like we may have a solution, but I just kind of wanted to mention that to you, Mr. Newberry, if you don't mind, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And that'd be a great thing to solve. I know there's been times I've gone like, did I dream it? I could have sworn I had some useful information last night, but then I went and ate dinner and can't find it again. So thank you for that process improvement. Any other suggestions on ways to involve people? Mr. Hopper, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily a suggestion, but just kind of a comment based on some of the stuff that was kind of mentioned there. And I see the volunteer and maybe the idea of free replacements or things like that. But some of the stuff when we're talking about like sharing costs, it sounds really familiar to the conversation that's gone on forever with Lake Chesterfield, which I will be honest to say that's my HOA, but and the lake that goes on there and the concerns of sharing money towards a private property and improving those or changing those. So just unless we have I think a clear-cut explanation on what that looks like and what the possibilities are, I don't think we want to get very far down that rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
Debbie, you got your hand up.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. Is it more going to be like voluntary by the neighborhoods impacted, or would it possibly concern an HOA special assessment for those subdivisions that are really impacted by the issue?
I'm with this kind of stuff, I'm thinking about really very simple things like, I know behind my house, most of the, tributary into the creek is just honeysuckle. So if folks are willing to go out and cut the honeysuckle down and the city can, in sharing costs, I mean, literally like dump a dumpster, and then we've negotiated a bulk price on whatever grass or tree or whatever is supposed to go in there.
Okay.
And so you have access to this for kind of like the saplings, like you can buy 100 of these cypress saplings for $4 or whatever, however that works. Like not a large quantity of money really at all, just an easier motivation to get people doing what they should do. And then we can focus on the big stuff.
Okay, thank you.
I guess another question I have is, it looks like some of the changes we could make to these detention basins could potentially lower maintenance costs, if I read the report correctly. And I know that the cost to mow the detention basins are a significant portion of the Timber Ridge HOA's, budget every year. Is there any possibility of sort of low interest loan, like if an HOA rather than a capital assessment said, hey, we can make some improvements now, we'll save enough in maintenance that we can probably squeeze it out of our budget over the next, 5 or 10 years. Is there any opportunity without, breaking laws or setting dangerous precedents to, help with upfront funding of things that would have a payout for the HOA? Mr. Cross?
Well, a couple things, Madam Chair. First of all, point of clarification, when I indicated that it could be done in terms of some sort of cost sharing, That is certainly with the caveat that city money cannot be expended for a subdivision or for private land, something like that. But I was kind of leveraging off what Mr. Farmer had to say in terms of this idea. The city would pay for or could pay for things that the city legally could pay for. But yes, we cannot invest public funds in a private venture. So then going along the lines of what you said, that would not be possible either. We would not upfront money for an HOA to do something. Again, it's a private entity, private land and so forth. So we would not be able to do that. So there would be some things that the city could expend some money on. There's also the caveat that the city can spend public money on private ventures when, if it improves public safety and public health. There are guidelines. It's not black and white. It's yes or no. There is a lot of gray there that public funds can be expended. I would get the city attorney involved when we get to those things to find out, if it's for the general welfare of the public, it's okay to do. Legally, you can do that. So each case has to stand on its own merits, but it's not just a pure yes or no situation. So, but funding, upfront money for an HOA, that's probably a hard no.
Okay, all right. Sometimes
Laura,
we make progress by by eliminating ideas. Thanks for being the guy with the answer, Mr. Cross.
Lauren, I see you got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair Farmer. Just two real quick questions. I appreciate Councilmember Hopper bringing up Lake Chesterfield, because I had meant to ask this earlier, but I forgot. Since you guys are kind of going through that process and meeting with the HOA, I noticed that it said in the document that it said Chesterfield Lake, but I assumed it was supposed to be Lake Chesterfield, could be used for an expansion of retention/detention. And I was wondering if Wilson Hydro could elaborate on that, and maybe that's something that you want to include in your meetings if changes to the lake are going to be made. Maybe have that conversation with them up front, and rather than kind of deciding what you want to present to council and then us turning around and going back and maybe adding that. So can you elaborate on when that would need to occur and what that even looks like or means?
Thank you, Ms. Edens. The modification of the lake is, at this point, it would be hard to describe, other than there may be the potential there for modifying the outlet structure, providing some additional storage volume that would reduce the flow rate being discharged for a given storm from the reservoir, which anytime you can reduce flow rate, you're going to improve the stability of the stream. But as part of this study, we didn't do any detailed analysis of the lake with the ongoing issues with it as far as holding water and some of the geotechnical concerns. We didn't go into any detail addressing that one, but there would need to be some pretty serious hydrologic modeling, some geotechnical investigations to determine whether or not it would be even feasible to make improvements that would benefit the downstream. I guess it's just too early to call at this point.
Too early to call. I would just hate for the HOA to spend money and refill it and then be asked by the city to put a different cap on. And then I did have one other question that's a change of topic. Do I have, or I guess anybody else for that matter, do I have any HOAs that aren't in compliance with maintaining their retention or detention basin that we need to send a letter to? I mean, I know periodically I find HOAs that aren't cleaning out culverts or their drains, but did you find, when you did reports, anything that had totally crumbled where I need to step in as a council member and have a discussion and say, we need you to make some improvements now, immediately?
We didn't inspect them for compliance with current regulations. No, that would be, I'd have to defer to the city staff on that.
Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
But is my recollection correct that where the detention basin at the Elegant Child had outright failed, that we were not really seeing that as an HOA issue. We were seeing it as a problem of the creek had eroded from the public side, that it wasn't really an issue with the
That's-
HOA.
That's correct, Madam Chair, that the erosion has completely destroyed part of the embankment that was detaining water, so that it's really a creek issue more than a detention basin maintenance issue.
All right.
Nathan, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna actually just volunteer because you mentioned some of the surveys and stuff. So just as a kind of a tangential point to that, we've as an HOA, Lake Chesterfield has invested in a lot of surveys that have been done. So I don't know if that was ever offered by any previous person that could provide to you guys if it would be helpful in any of your studies. So if you would need that information or that would be beneficial, let me know.
In future phases, absolutely, that information would be helpful.
So I apologize, everybody, I'm running a little bit late, but I understand that perhaps there's a motion on the floor. Is that correct?
I don't know that we've made a motion yet. I think that there was a suggestion that it might be helpful in advancing our work to accept the report after we've had a chance to ask questions and discuss it. So are there any more questions or comments before we see if someone's ready to make that as a motion? All right. I guess I don't think it keeps us from accepting the report. I did have a question when I looked at the table 1 on page 7 that sort of listed the top 10, and I think they had been sorted by volume. And then there were some that were upstream of the triple meander, so potentially would have a higher impact on the most critical area. There was one that my, kind of squinting at it, and I admit my eyesight isn't that good anymore, and my color printer wasn't color printing, so it was really challenging to find all of these things. But it looked like number 6, which is 24 V2s, it looked like one of them might actually be at town center. Is that on public land by any chance? I guess, does anybody know, has anybody sort of taken this list and sort of said, what's the jurisdiction for that piece of property look like? Is it an HOA? Is it a private individual? Is it public lands?
No, we haven't identified specifically the ownership.
So if we have some of these complex issues about we're not sure what we can legally do or not, there might be another pass that hasn't been done that we could do, sort of looking at degree of difficulty in terms of permit. I know most of them you said you didn't think would require permitting, but some might. So maybe if we could kind of take the list and, highlight the ones that we didn't think were going to require permitting, highlight the ones where maybe the jurisdiction was less complex, and see if we can find sort of our first place to strike using that filter might be a suggestion I would make. But I don't think that would keep us from accepting the report. If I see Mr. Patton, your hand is up. Or again, is that my bad eyesight? Or is that my mouse? No, that's my mouse. It was chasing the cattail that was in somebody's frame a little while ago, I guess. So is there any other questions or comments that would keep us from entertaining a motion to accept this report? All right, fishing for a motion then.
I'll make the motion.
All right.
I'll second.
All in favor of accepting the report from Wilson Hydro part 2?
Aye.
All in favor, say aye. All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Well, hopefully that is a piece of what city staff needs to start folding this into the budget process and seeing which of those recommendations we can turn into realities you know, in the short term as well as the long term. Joe, if you want the meeting back, you're welcome to have it, you know.
I think you're doing great.
All right, we're as near as I can tell, we're through agenda item. Where were we? That stack of papers over here. Any other comments from Wilson Hydro before? You're welcome to stick around, but if you want to excuse yourself and catch the end of the game, I understand that too. Mr. Runich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before Wilson Hydro, Mr. Wilson and Mr. Wagner leave, Mr. Wilson sent to me the other day an email saying that the Evergreen Forest project is part of the permitting process that they're going to begin. And I just wanted to verify that before they left the meeting.
That's correct, Mr. Bunich. The permitting for the Evergreen project was included in that proposal, along with the triple meander and elegant child detention.
So I just wanted to verify that, and that was a question at our last meeting. And with that answer now, we know that once we begin that process with Wilson Hydro, we'll be addressing, obviously, what we consider the top 3 critical locations. So thank you. And I do want to extend my appreciation to Wilson Hydro, Todd and Joe. I think they've done they've done a great deal of work in a short period of time and been able to basically get the information back to us so we can discuss it at our regular meeting. So thank you.
Yeah,
We appreciate the opportunity to work with you. Thanks again.
Yeah,
And I'm encouraged that not only did they do good work and quickly, but that some of the answers they got, I think, were very encouraging in terms of we can make an impact, you know, in the long term, and we can maybe buy ourselves some time in the short term with some projects that, you know, don't have $1 million plus price tags. So.
and then I'm actually noticing in the chat here, we may have addressed this a second ago. I'm assuming this is perhaps Mr. Archeski, but he is asking that the wetland area adjacent to Lake Chesterfield was not included in the detention study. This area is separate from Lake Chesterfield. The wetland area collects water from Chesterfield shores, the harbors, and the cove. I believe the area could be enhanced. Currently, it is a mosquito haven. So maybe we can add that on a list of something we can just take a look at as well. Let's make sure we're covering all of our bases.
Consider it done, sir.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Carol, back to you.
All right, that I think moves us along to agenda item 6, which is the analysis of the work program matrix for 2021 and 2022.
Madam Chair, with your permission, I'll provide some introduction and then we can kind of take it from there.
Okay.
As you know, at our August meeting, we talked a great deal about what our next steps should be now that we realize that funding, at least from the sales tax or from some outside agency, organization, or entity, isn't imminent, and that we're going to kind of have to do the best we can with what we have in terms of capital improvement program funding. And so the thought is to kind of put together a start of a matrix. This certainly isn't a finished product. I noticed that I failed to put the USGS study as an item that's been completed and is underway, so to speak. And also, based upon tonight, I think we should add something relating to projects, both more so those that as we've discussed, could be done in the shorter time frame versus a longer time frame. But the logic behind the matrix is first to identify those things that have been completed by the task force. And as you can see, a lot of that has to do with the analysis of our watersheds and the identification of problem areas. And then from there, we began that winnowing process to see what of those that have been identified, what are the most critical locations and where do we need to concentrate our efforts. We also then started that process of getting public education as a key component in the process of the task force. And a lion's share of that was done by Ms. Holthouse, one of our co-chairs, And she has availed herself to different organizations, associations, whatever the situation might be, that take our PowerPoint presentation on the road and let people know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how they can help. More so, we have a number of things that are ongoing. And one of those, as you know, is the permitting process for the 3 critical locations, which Wilson Hydro will begin probably this coming month, October, or just a few days from now. And then, as you can see, we also have some that have not started. One of those items is obviously with the permitting process on our 3 critical locations, as Mr. Brown will tell you, eventually, no matter how far we get in the permitting process with the federal and state and local agencies, we'll eventually need engineered plans. Those plans that will show everybody that we can do what we hope to do and do it without causing upstream or downstream problems, and have a cost associated with it through a bidding process. And then there's a couple that have not been started or are on hold. And so collectively, I think what the next step is to begin expanding the matrix based upon the adoption of tonight's report and those items that can fit under those small project heading, and then obviously add the USGS study. So hopefully you found some of this information helpful. But again, I always like to come back and emphasize that we've been at this for a bit of time. And certainly it'd be nice if we had done a couple of major projects, but we all know that we're struggling with funding. But I think we have accomplished a lot. And as Mr. Cross said at the last meeting, and I was reminded by Mr. Newberry, if those federal dollars come available, I think we'll be in a position as to have several projects shovel ready, which will put us on the inside track for funding. So I just always like to end by saying we've accomplished a lot. There's a lot still to do, but let's hold our heads high as we move forward each month. Thank you.
And I do appreciate you pulling that together. I think it is nice to, not only keep looking at all the things in front of us that still need to be done, but really to take a moment to both recognize the things that have been accomplished and also, just make it clear that we know what our priorities are, and we're, using the resources we have to work on the right things. The one question I had is, I believe at one point we thought it was important to get back to the residents that had submitted some information about critical locations. And our first plan for how we were going to make that happen has not been able to finish that assignment. And I'm wondering if we need to whether we're okay with just continuing to put that kind of on hold, or whether that's something city staff maybe can do, or whether we need a volunteer from the committee to at least reach out to people and if nothing else, give them, give them your report on what we've done and what we're working on, so that they don't feel like their feedback, all their information went into some sort of black hole from which no information returns. So.
Well, first and foremost, thanks. It needs to be added to the matrix. And at one point, Dr. Hammer and Dan Ron, the city's assistant city engineer, were going to do just what the task force had asked. So I'm not going to speak for Dan, Ron, nor Rick Brown, the director of the department, but I'm sure that we can begin that process.
Okay.
And maybe at the October or November meeting, we can kind of tell you what we think we can or can't do. And then if there are volunteers that want to assist, we can certainly do that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Edens?
Yes, I do actually have an update on the federal funds from the Missouri Municipal League Conference over the last couple of days. The National League of Cities did an update from DC on Zoom. So the policy advocating group, that's the federal arm that we use as cities. And they are anticipating that the infrastructure bill will pass the House Thursday. Our city administrator has done a really great job keeping us council members informed of what's what breakdown in terms of the amount of money earmarked for bridges, for roads, for other forms of infrastructure. What I did learn in addition was that they're doing something called bonus grants that are expected to be funding. Bonus grants include the BRIC program, which is the grant that I found before, and the nice thing is that it's going to be funded at an increase. So there will be more money, and hopefully that would increase our chances of either a bigger payout or at least getting that grant in addition. So I was pretty excited to see that program listed.
Fingers crossed. Thank you for that information. I'm not seeing any other hands up. Any other items that as we, look between here and the next meeting, we would like to at least put on the radar, realizing we've got people that are juggling lots of different conflicting priorities and how they spend their time and how they spend the city's money. But is there anything else we want to get on people's short-term list of requests? Again, I'm a newbie in this process and working in this environment, but we seem to, fairly frequently kind of run into these sort of what can we legally do, and it's hard to, as Mr. Cross said, there's a lot of it's very situationally specific. So I'm wondering whether it's useful to ask the city attorney to give us kind of a 101 on these things, like we got on detention basins from Wilson Hydro a couple of months ago, or whether it might be helpful to take one or two, maybe maybe the Triple Meander and the Elegant Child Detention Basin, and maybe the biggest volume detention basin that hasn't failed, that we think we could have an impact with, and sort of use those as test cases to just talk about the legal issues and challenges would face as should we once we start going down that path. Mr. Cross?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly, if this task force would like to have the city attorney give a primer at the next meeting about what the city can and cannot do, I'm sure he'd be quite willing to do so, and I would reach out to him and ask him to attend the next meeting and do so. If he's unable, he can certainly put together maybe a one-page summary about that. But Mr. Young is very accommodating and providing guidance to other committees and other task force about their roles and what they can and can't do. So with the task force permission, I will reach out to Mr. Young and see if he can attend the next meeting and do as you asked, Madam Chair.
Okay. Makes sense to the rest of the group, or am I certainly don't want to waste anybody's time if it's just a Carol question, but I see a few heads nodding, so I think that would be just it'd be helpful for all of us to get a little smarter and maybe get our wheels spinning in ways that aren't going to run into legal barriers.
Well, consider it done.
All right, thank you very much. So as we get past the agenda item, I don't know, is there anything beside, I think we've commented on it. Is there any approval or?
I think Mr. Berger has his hand up. Perhaps.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you for calling attention. I would ask that potentially we consider particularly the Evergreen Forest location in that evaluation. I think that's one site in particular that there has been a fair bit of contention around what legally is the city able to help sponsor. And certainly there's a big sense of immediacy around that location. And so while we're still working to secure funding potentially for a lot of the other sites and the work that's going on, as a potential side project or ancillary funding mechanisms need to be considered. So if we really need to be thinking about the HOA or how we potentially get support to have MSD co-fund, even though there's been a lot of reluctance there. I think any runway that we can get on understanding what the bounds of what we're able to work within would be very, very helpful to start gathering support and figuring out what we can do there.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And I think, it's always great to take sort of the principles and the guidelines and say, okay, in a particular case, let's see how that plays out. And I would certainly support that being, case number one that we try to walk our way through.
Mr.
Any other-
Sherman,
Yeah, what I have to say is probably quite obvious, and some have already kind of said it. It's been on my mind a long time. Being a Point Clayton in our situation, I've often wondered what kind of funding is going to be available when, like in our case, Cox Creek, which runs north, almost the full length of our subdivision. If it is out of, let's say, our common ground, out of our property, the subdivision property, where all types of funding could come in, and that's probably the best situation. If some places where the creek may be in our common ground, in our property, in that case, if it comes down to a point where it's just an individual house that needs immediate help, what about that situation? I see three different kinds of situations, and it would be great to hear from the attorney. That's my question.
Well, and I guess a related question, I kind of, one of the notes I made to myself was like, what are people's, responsibilities? But then I know there's also been times in this process we've been really cautious about, whether we have the right to cross somebody's private property and look at the creek and assess whether it's in bad shape. So, it's kind of that balance of rights and responsibilities. And, if a tree falls into the creek on private property and the homeowner doesn't do anything about it, what recourse do we have if we can't fix it ourselves because it's on private property as a city? And the homeowner says, I don't think it's a problem. I think another good question is what if people are responsible and not living up to those responsibilities, do we have any recourse, or what does that look like? So.
Lauren, I think, has a
Ms. Edens.
Yes,
Ms.
thanks.
Edens.
Thanks, Joe. So I'd like to make a suggestion. I'm assuming it hasn't happened yet because it didn't at the last meeting, but between now and the next meeting, can we have maybe both Rick and Joe, our two co-chairs, and then let's have Mr. Berger as well meet with the HOA, because you do need help and they do own the land, which means they have to be complicit in any action that we do. And we already have the plans to kind of fix it and estimated costs. So we need to know, can they just go ahead and do a special assessment? I don't know off the top of my head, since it's not my ward, exactly how many houses, how much that would cost per house. Let's say they refuse to do a special assessment, or to maybe we would have legal recourse as a city. So maybe, I would hate to have to go after an HOA, but that's one possibility. Number two, depending on how that meeting goes, I would suggest you guys set up a meeting with the Land Learning Foundation. I also found out at the MML conference that they are going to expand the types of services that they will be offering and the types of funding that you can apply for. So I'd love to see you guys make some progress and not just wait on us, and that would be my suggestion. But the HOA has to be involved when they own the land, and you guys having a face-to-face meeting on Zoom or in person is really central to that. And the trustees need to be out there, walking that as well with you all and an engineer.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be an excellent use of my time, and I would hope everybody else would sign up for that. And yeah, I think that we're talking about the work list for the city. I think that that's something that's probably a higher priority than, certainly getting back to homeowners that,
Yeah, if they will do a
Budget survey.
special assessment, this can all go away very quickly.
Mr. Sturman.
Yeah, one more. This is something that has been kind of a scary thought to me for a long time. A lot of years, when I continue to serve as the president of IHOA, and I'm well aware of our numbers and our budget and our numbers all the time, how much money we got in the bank. We are a subdivision of 172 homes. I think financially, I don't know how we compare with other subdivisions, but I think we're pretty good shape. But when I look at working in that creek, correcting problems in that creek, and if some of that falls in our lap, and being formerly a lot of construction estimate, I've said before, the kind of dollars I see, let's say our reserve account, well, my gosh, that wouldn't even pay for the wheels on the car. I mean, that wouldn't go to first base. And special assessment, well, just think 172. I don't know what kind of money we would be getting into that we would be responsible for, but boy, that would be a pretty real bad hit to a subdivision such as us, at least.
Mr. Berger.
Yeah, not to dwell too much on this particular example, but I would like to echo that sentiment. We're a subdivision of about 38 homes, so we're very small. And regardless of the financial impact that would take, there is some due diligence. And I see Mr. Hopper has had his hand up, so maybe we can get to him next. I think there is some due diligence to uncover around who's really legally responsible for that. So yes, the HOA is responsible for maintaining our side of the common ground. The adjoining neighborhood behind us is responsible for maintaining their common ground on that side. But are those HOAs responsible for maintaining the water flows that go through that creek? I would venture to say they are not. And those are a very clear causal problem for what we're facing here. And so even, at what I found to be a fairly conservative estimate of, roughly $350,000 to $400,000 to remediate this specific problem here at Evergreen Forest that would cover about the back of 6 to 8 homes. You're talking about an assessment, if we were to determine that the HOA was responsible for that, of, $80,000 a home. And sorry, but that's just untenable. Like, it's just, that would not happen. And I also don't think that that MSD should be in a position to be able to wash their hands of this, because they have some pretty clear culpability here.
Mr. Hopper.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're kind of beating a dead horse with this, but I mean, I'm actually just listening to this conversation. And it just seems to be like an echo of the exact conversation that sort of happened around Lake Chesterfield for a while now, as far as, who's responsible for fixing that. We've on our own have gone through, like, tried to have conversations with MSD, and that's like trying to, I don't know, you just yelling into the night, hoping somebody answers you back, and it's never really going to happen. But, but just kind of along those same lines, if we're coming in and telling that a HOA that they have to fix this, right? You guys have to fix this, and the city is going to do nothing for you, basically. Like, I just, in my opinion, before we would go down that route, I think it would be in our best interest to have a good conversation with the city attorney to know exactly what our options would be to provide support to those HOAs, and what kind of grounds we have to stand on to say that HOA needs to take care of it. Like I said, again, Lake Chesterfield is a good example. You come to our HOA and say, we know your lake drains a lot of water into Cox Creek. It's the biggest if you look at the maps of Cox Creek, Lake Chesterfield is the largest retention basin that's on that entire map, by far. So if you come in and said, you guys need to fix that, and then our immediate argument is going to be, well, what about all of the subdivisions that feed stormwater into that lake that don't have to pay anything to it? but yet now we're footing the bill to fix this and try to do something with it. So I think, and all the, houses that are downstream that are going to benefit from the fact that our lake works correctly and that we decided that we're not just going to open it and say, well, we're not going to have a lake anymore. Right. So I think having a conversation before we go down the route of the conversations to HOAs and that we're going to have any demands on them, I think would be to know what our even footing is going to be in that, and kind of what that conversation would look like from a city. Because I agree with what you guys said. I'd be very, very hesitant to go to any HOA and say, well, we decided kind of now all of a sudden we're going to look at retention basins, and now you need to foot this hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix this retention basin because now we've decided to look at it. Just my thought, my opinion.
Mr. Cross.
Thank you, sir. I think with all due respect, we're kind of going around in circles here, and until Mr. Young is able to join this group and give some legal advice, I don't know that it's productive very much anymore. I will say this, however, the HOAs are simply a group of individuals that have been appointed or elected to that position to represent the homeowners. The HOAs are not an entity in and of themselves. They do not have assets in and of themselves. The assets that they control are monies that were paid by the homeowners. So it's not the HOAs that are going to be footing the bill. It is, in fact, the homeowners through liens or special assessments or otherwise. But again, I don't want to, speak on legalities. That's for Mr. Young to do. But engaging the HOAs certainly is a good idea. But to expect the HOAs as a group of the HOA themselves, I believe that Mr. Young will say, no, that's not the HOAs. It's the HOAs will say, all right, just like with Lake Chesterfield. I'm a resident of Lake Chesterfield. I've been in Lake Chesterfield since 1999. I was there when the lake disappeared the first time and got assessed $1,000. I was there when it disappeared the second time. I've been there for its entire problem. So the HOA wasn't stepping up to pay it, other than the monies that we pay on our annual dues, and that was kicked up a little bit to build a little bit of reserve. But the big hit for 660 homes or thereabouts was $1,000 each that we all had to fork over in 2004. The HOAs don't have the money. The money is the homeowners themselves. So in a subdivision of 38 or in a subdivision of 172 or whatever, these are big ticket items that again might be a little difficult for those subdivisions to swallow. But again, I think it best maybe if we just kind of if we can maybe hold off a little bit more and wait until Mr. Young can join us at the next meeting. That might be more productive. Thank you.
All right, Carol.
Joe. I guess I'm feeling, I echo what Mr. Cross said. I think, I can ask questions and say what if, but I think we really do need somebody that is an expert in the area to speak to what's possible, and then I'll go from there. I would like to hope, Joe, that you'll join me in committing to, having a meeting with the folks at Evergreen and, just hearing from their side what's possible. And let's elevate that as a good test case of, it isn't practical to, put thousands and thousands of dollars of assessments on, or, tens of thousands of dollars of assessments on 38 homes to solve the problem. We keep bumping up into this. It really is, a regional systemic, it's the water that's starting at the top of the hill miles away that, ends up in somebody's backyard. And, we've got to figure out a way to make that something that we're all recognizing as a problem that needs to be solved and then working on together. So.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with meeting with them. I think you're exactly right. I mean, I'm excited to have Mr. Young come in and talk about the particulars here, but in the couple years that I've been on this, I really don't see any way, no matter how we take this, that everybody in this city, in one way or the other, feeds into this watershed. And so, while it is somebody's backyard, in this case, Mr. Berger having a difficult situation there, which is related to an HOA, there is water that is feeding into there from somewhere else. So I don't know how we're not going to have to look at this in an incredibly creative way to make this seem palatable and fair in a way to everybody involved. I mean, it is a complicated issue, but it doesn't seem like a difficult solution to me. So we'll meet with them. We'll see what they have to say for sure.
And
What
I
else?
guess as I'm looking at the, moving past onto agenda item 7 and the sub bullets, kind of the work program carryover items, I think run us right into, some of these legal issues. So maybe this is a good point to kind of hit a pause button in tonight's agenda and see if there's, anything, maybe we want to move our focus more to what the agenda should be a month from now rather than, chasing our tails around on things when we know we need some more input before we'd be able to make smart decisions. So
Yeah,
I have next month, we're going to have a report on a meeting with you and I and some city staff are going to have with Evergreen. We have the city attorney coming in to give us a 101 and again, maybe speak to a couple of these specific issues and probably a slightly revised work plan for the things Joe, and he looked at the second time and said, oh yeah, there's something I even missed. So I'm sure that will evolve over the next month as well.
Mr. Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Co-chairs and in particular, Ms. Holthouse, you might want to mention that we are trying to pull together a visit by Senator Schatz.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah.
In October. So perhaps, depending on the date, this group is scheduled to meet on the 27th of October. Perhaps that visit will have, I've been working with Senator Schatz's office and trying to set up where he would come and visit with some members or however many members of this task force would like to join him at some of the a couple of the areas, more critical areas. So I just wanted to bring that up, Ms. Holthouse, if you wanted to expand on that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. I will, if I participate on October 27th, it's going to have to be virtually. So I don't know how that will work for a creek walk, but I certainly wouldn't want my schedule to, keep that event from happening. And I really do think it's, as you step back from it, we've got, a regional watershed, systemic issues that cross, HOA boundaries, they cross municipal boundaries. And I think the one regional authority that's been given a responsibility for managing this, which is MSD, has not been given any funding to do that. So, I think it is appropriate that we engage people beyond our borders to say, here's what's going on and here's the specific problems, but also here's sort of the puzzle we're trying to solve that's missing some pieces. So I look forward to seeing what somebody at the state level might have from their perspective as a solution to offer.
Hey,
so thank you for staying on top of that, Mr. Cross.
Steve, I don't know if you will know this answer. My term limit knowledge is limited at best, but is Senator Schatz not almost termed out now?
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Okay. Well, I mean, I certainly would enjoy having a senator come visit us, and hopefully he can pass along whatever feelings he has to whoever takes that seat next.
Well, yes, he is reaching the end of his term. However, his office, his schedule coordinator has indicated that he might have time in October. We thought we might have been able to set it up in September, but that didn't work out. But I reached out to her just yesterday, in fact, and we're trying to find a date in October that works with his schedule. And once I know that, then I can communicate that to you and Ms. Holthouse so that you guys can schedule it with that. So I don't know when it'll be. I don't know what he will have to offer. We've had his Dan Egemeyer, I don't know what you would call him, speak before council and provide some information. So it's better than nothing. Anyway, we'll see where that goes. But yep, there will be others running for that office.
Well, we can certainly approach them once they make their determinations on who those people would be. I think I would advocate very strongly for next month. I think that a lot of our discussion has kind of centered back to having a real conversation with Mr. Young about what it is we can do. So my gut tells me that we're going to have many questions and lots of conversations with him. So I would probably advocate to keep our agenda pretty limited to that. Mr. Hopper, what you got?
Oh, I just one maybe suggestion to help with that too. I'm sure everybody thought of that, but if somebody would want to maybe if you had questions ahead of time that we could maybe start a list going that could get to Mr. Young before he showed up at the meeting and had to answer things on the fly, like, maybe give him some heads up to know specific topics that we would want to discuss. So he would at least have a chance to maybe do a little specific preparation around that. I think would probably make the time a little more useful.
Could not agree more. Steve, do you think you could just ask him about how much time he thinks he might need to get up to speed so we can get the questions in, obviously, before, so he has enough time to know what's going on?
Certainly I can do that. I will tell you that Mr. Young is very, very good about thinking on his feet. Number one, extremely knowledgeable about this and all matters municipalities, et cetera. But Councilmember Hopper's suggestion about having perhaps if there are some questions that you all, specific questions, if you would send them to me, I would be more than happy to coordinate that and get that to Mr. Young. But yes, I can find out and I mean, he can go in as much depth as you want, especially answering some of these specific questions. So I guess just, send me the questions. And if you all want to allow him, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever you think, because this is an important topic. The primer itself, in terms of what the city can and cannot do, is a pretty short conversation, quite honestly. I mean, that might be about 10 minutes in terms of him summarizing what can be done. The majority of the time would be spent in perhaps addressing specific issues. So please use me as the funnel, if you will. Send them to me and I will get them to John. Thank you.
And I'd like to suggest, I know we've used this process before of kind of setting a deadline, which I know always inspires me to action the night before. So maybe if we set a target of getting our questions to Mr. Cross for the city attorney by Monday, October 11th, that would give Mr. Cross a chance to kind of go through and eliminate the duplicates and not put anybody on the spot if we have very specific questions that might require a little research to answer on the 29th. But I agree with Joe that, I think we should keep the agenda very, very thin beyond that, because I think that's been an issue we've been kind of, bumping up against continually, for years now. So it'd be nice to get some clarity about what's possible, and not only in general, but in specific situations.
All right. Well then, what else we got on the agenda? I think that pretty much wraps it up. Am I right?
Mr. Farmer, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Newberry is going to update you on the MSD town hall meetings.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I'll be as brief as possible. The department is presenting information to the task force at tonight's meeting regarding the MSD Project Clear virtual town hall meetings that it will be holding over the next few months. The first of which was held today, midday, and the remaining meetings will be held at 6 p.m. on 6 different dates that are included as background information with its memo. The purpose of the town hall meetings are twofold. The first being a public education component for MSD to educate the public regarding its responsibilities, funding sources, et cetera. The second is to get public input from those who attend regarding stormwater issues in its jurisdiction. So the department just wanted to bring this to your attention for you to attend if you'd like to, or we encourage you to provide the information to your friends, families, and neighbors so that MSD can get as much Wildwood input as possible. With that, Mr. Chair, if anybody has any questions, departments are available.
I would just make the comment, especially since we may wrap up a little early tonight, that the next meeting, I believe, is next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. So you can just stay in that Watershed Erosion Task Force rhythm and jump on a Zoom call next week, same time, different channel. So
There we go. All right. Well, hopefully we can get some folks in there. I'm going to do my best to hop on and see what they have to say. I'm pretty certain it's going to be what they've already told us, but who knows? Maybe they will surprise us. You never know. Yes, sir, Mr. Vunich. Oh, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
There we go. All right. Well, if nobody has anything else, Carol, I don't know if you have any further closing remarks. You good?
I'm good.
All right. Then I guess we would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion, and I'll say that Joe Garitano just told me that MDNR has interest loans for as little as 0.8%. So HOAs can look into that, and the city as well.
All righty.
I will second the motion.
All right. I guess that is non-debatable. So all in favor of adjourning our meeting here this evening, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks for coming, everybody. Carol, excellent job leading this evening. We will see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time.